Welcome, everyone. Nice to be with you again. Hope your week's going well. My name is Michele Floriani. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Sequoia. It is my pleasure to be the host today for another one of our webinars in the Return to Work series. Today is cool because it's actually part 2 of something we started on Tuesday. I can see by some of the names of the people online today, we have some of you for the second part of that, which is great. Appreciate your time and interest. We've got some great content today, and I'll set that up. So Tuesday focused on policy, people, and problem solving tied to this extended work from home period, something that we're all going through as people leaders, as business leaders, as individuals, as family members. And we looked on Tuesday from a legal lens and kind of an HR people lens across a couple key topics. Today is really double clicking on the people side and going down deeper into supporting parents, mental health, the company culture. We have this awesome group of experts here to talk through and shed some light and a lot of knowledge to be shared. So I'll do a little table setting to kick us off. We got Rebecca Grubman to talk to us with Kalina from Sequoia on supporting working parents. We're going to go deep on mental health with Justin Hung from Ginger. And then Craig Foreman's joining us from Culturing Up on discussion with Kalina on really what's happening. Where do we go with culture during this time, and where do we refine and reshape the cultural components that were so important and continue to be so important to so many of our businesses and our people there. And then excited to have a dedicated slot today on Q&A. So that will be your questions and this great group of people answering and filling in some gaps and responding to the things that you want to know about most. So please take advantage of that, and then we'll close off and be done. Also, kind of like on Tuesday, we have injected a client into the discussions that will come in for what I call kind of client commentary. And Crizel's joining us today from 23andMe. So thank you for that. Should be fun to get your perspective as we go through the content. So that is today. Again, reminder, the Q&A, so we disabled chat, but Q&A, which is labeled as Q&A on your bar there, is where you can go and submit questions at any time during this session. And then again, the last 10 minutes, we'll take a look at some and try to answer them. And then anything that we don't answer today, we definitely will follow up and try to get you an answer or factor into future content. Okay? So let's begin. Similar to Tuesday's theme, right? Today is really looking at this period of extended work from home, right? This is a time where a lot of companies have chosen to hold back on their plans and returning to the office. That said, there are some who are charging ahead and they have their reasons for it. But whether you're going ahead or you're staying at home, there's certainly one thing that everyone's dealing with, which is there are a lot of people who continue to work at home, right? Even those that are coming back to the office right now and back to the workplace are having a hybrid model where they have a fair amount of their population at home. And naturally, those who are not coming to the office have everyone at home. And it's been going on about 6 months now, and we're starting to see some real symptoms showing up on everything from healthcare claims to engagement, productivity. And so today is really about unpacking, how can we support working parents better, right? They're going through a lot of uncertainty in their lives, a lot of additional stresses that aren't work-related, but obviously intersect with the obligations at work. Mental health, right? A lot happening in our world, on a social level, on an economic level, and then on a personal level too, with some of the stresses maybe accentuated because of the work environment or other things happening with health. And then company culture, right? I mean, so many of us, I know, had massive elements of in-office cultural ritual, right? Or ways that we've invested in things that were meaningful to our people inside the office. And if they're not there now to engage in that and to participate, where does that culture go? How do we need to rethink how we activate culture in a distributed environment? So again, we have some wonderful people to kind of unpack those conversations with us today, give us a lot to think about. The spirit of today, I can summarize as just saying, the last couple of weeks, we've received hundreds and hundreds of questions from our clients, very naturally just asking, what are people doing? What are the considerations? What are the options I should be thinking about during this time so that I can make an informed decision for our company? And that's really what we're trying to do today, is to give you a lot of those options. So get out your notepad. We're going to have a lot of data. Again, we're going to go a little deeper than we did on Tuesday on these 3 topics and share information from surveys that are ongoing and things that are being collected by the experts we've gathered today. So without further ado, I wanted to hand over to Kalina, our Director of Wellbeing, to moderate this section with Rebecca. So Kalina.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michele. Can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Great. All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Kalina Quibell, Director of Wellbeing at Sequoia. As Michele mentioned, we have 3 really interesting topics to go through with you today. So before I go ahead and set this up, we thought we'd do a little bit of a lay of the land here. And for any of you that were on the webinar on Tuesday, we used these slides that you'll see here that go into kind of what are the challenges when it comes to supporting working parents. So you'll see this slide as each one we go through. But the first off is when it comes to supporting working parents, I mean, if people are overwhelmed, I think to say it as an understatement. Parents are trying to juggle childcare, teaching, this heavy workload. And then there's the business challenge side of it. So what comes up now is, we're hearing, how do we sustain this report? So yes, we're doing what we can to be flexible, but it's clear longer term plans needed. We don't want to put work on those that just don't have kids, or, we need to try to figure out how to sustain this knowing schools will be remote, most of them through the remainder of the fall or not whole school year. And then what to consider. So, resources, communications, and strategic planning. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. Before I pass it off to Rebecca, I wanted to give you guys a quick update on our survey that we just launched on Tuesday as it relates to working parents. So on the next slide, you'll go ahead and see here that this is from our Working Parents Pulse Survey. We've been doing a few of these surveys throughout the time of COVID, and we've already collected some amazing data. Hundreds of people have already filled this out, and the findings are quite significant. So far, we've seen 50% of companies indicated employees have requested or received a reduction of hours to accommodate childcare. 20% have had employees take a leave of absence as a result of losing childcare, and 10% have actually had employees quit their job to take care of a child or children, which is huge. On the next, you'll see that this is kind of thinking ahead, but 16% are worried about parents not coming back from parental leave. So these are people already on maternity or paternity leave. 61% are considering manager training to help support working parents. So we'll touch on that both in this section in mental health and culture. And then 95% of many of you are already allowing flexible work hours. So the survey will remain open through Monday at noon. You can see the quick link there, sequoia.com/surveys to participate. We really encourage you to fill it out so we can get even more great data on this. And included in that is a lot of great examples of people giving anecdotal stories and creative ways that they're supporting their people too. So you will receive the results of that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Rebecca, who's going to kick us off with some of the findings of Clio.
Hi all, I'm Rebecca Grubman. I'm Director of Product Marketing at Clio. For those who aren't familiar with Clio, we are a support system for working families. We sell mainly to large employers who are looking for programs and resources to support their people as they work to balance growing their careers and their families. So we have one-on-one guided support and an app for individuals from thinking of having a family through parents up to children of age 12. I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but one of the things we've been really focused on is that within every company, your leaders and so many of your employees are likely parents. And as COVID-19 continues to be something that's really present in our lives, their resilience is waning. We conduct surveys with our members on a periodic basis. And we did one at the beginning of the pandemic in April and added a lot of questions to better understand how COVID is impacting employees as they think about balancing family and life. And so on the next few slides, I'll be comparing some of the data. The first one was just understanding childcare. And so in April, half of families reported that they did not have childcare, and that situation got worse as time has gone on. So in June, 35% happened. And we heard many stories of parents having to be creative of how do they split up their workday, balancing with partners, thinking about family to fill that need. Another thing we found is parents were pretty optimistic early on in the pandemic and had plans of either moving closer to family, potentially setting up a nanny or a share care model. But in reality, those plans weren't realized. So in June, we found that although 53% planned to move closer to family, only 28% actually ended up having outside help. And 16% of our respondents were open or interested in having a nanny or share care model set up, but only 3% formed that. And a lot of that was due to parents saying just the logistics, managing that, how to set that up in the time of COVID was really overwhelming. This is a helpful statistic, just thinking particularly about the impact of COVID on women who are working. And so finding that full-time working moms in two-parent households are working an average of 22 extra hours a week on childcare as they try to balance their work. And this leads into a surprising finding that we found. So in April, 20% of our parents said that they were considering leaving the workforce due to the challenges of balancing work and life from COVID. And in June, we found that 1 in 3 of our parents actually said that either themselves or their partner had either left the workforce or gone part-time due to the challenges of balancing childcare and work. And in 70% of cases, that was the woman. And so where are we today? This problem is not going away. We're hearing about more and more schools that are not going to be opening. And so this is something that working parents are going to continue with. Clio is one of the organizing companies behind the Invest in Parents initiative. And this is a pledge that a number of companies have signed, really saying they're interested in stepping up and raising awareness about the challenges around being working parents and thinking creatively during this time of different benefits and ways to address this. And so just last week, we held our first virtual summit for different company leaders who had signed the pledge, where we presented information about what is the state of working parents. We shared some information from a survey that I'll be going through with you. And we also had breakout groups so that different HR leaders could really talk with each other and hear directly from each other what they're doing during this time. Here's some of the companies that have joined. We have a huge mix from tech, VC, many very already family-friendly companies as well. One of the things we found is that employers are hearing from their employees that they are having challenges balancing work and childcare. And so it's great to know that people are speaking up. We also were really excited to see that companies are already actively working to put into place new measures or policies to support parents during the pandemic or in progress. Only about 30% hadn't already taken action. And then of the companies in the Invest in Parents task force, 80% were talking about investing more in benefits. And that doesn't mean they're all necessarily already doing this. We had some conversations around budget constraints. How do you get buy-in from senior leaders to bring on more programs? But it's definitely a topic of conversation amongst all the HR leaders. And then this is a lot of data, but we found this just really interesting. So we asked of the different companies represented, what are benefits that they currently provide and what would they provide in the landscape that we're in now as we think about the pandemic? And so Kellyanna had mentioned like flexible work. That was something we also found over 90% of the companies offered. Many of what you would see as more traditional offerings. And we saw a huge increase though in companies saying that they would offer more childcare resources, parent education programs, virtual care programs, anything to help alleviate some of this pain point around caregiving for parents as they balance with work. We also think as we look to the future and the future of work, how do family benefits stack up? And so companies, I think, are also having discussions around many of their prior benefits might not be relevant right now. And how can they think about being creative and reallocating those budgets? So I was shocked to see how much it costs per employee per year, for example, for cups of coffee. And so there's lots of opportunities to think about ways of shifting budget at this time. Now, in terms of what Clio is specifically doing to help working parents, since day one, we've always been about helping working parents. Our programs and offerings are really focused on helping around 3 areas: health, career, and parent caregiving. And COVID has really shifted the focus in how deeply parents are feeling the pain points of managing caregiving, etc. And so we are continuing to expand our offerings there. We launched Clio Care, which is a partnership with Urban Sitter, where we expanded our resources in the Clio app for up to age 12 and also allow companies to buy a membership to Urban Sitter for their employees. We've started launching curriculum and coaching. One of the things that's really important is many parents traditionally outsourced the care and education of their children, and now it's falling on parents. And so how do you equip parents with curriculum, activities, knowing how to engage their children in a developmentally appropriate way? And even a lot of our guides are coaching parents on how do you set up your home to be an enriching learning space and making parents feel confident as they take on these responsibilities that educators used to do. And then lastly, I mentioned we've expanded to age 12. We've really been focused on more learn from home and equipping parents to kind of have this hybrid relationship as educator, parent, worker. We've increased our support around mental health throughout the parenthood journey. And we've launched a lot of new content trainings around COVID-19, health and safety, and better tips and parent groups and support on staying sane as families continue to work to balance their lives with their work.
Perfect. Thank you, Rebecca. And so hopefully this is helpful for everyone. I think just realizing the numbers and the statistics are really important during all of the planning. And so we really wanted to share that Invest in Parents initiative. We will be sharing the link with all of you, or you can see it at investinparents.com. It's an awesome initiative that's pulling together a lot of companies. And really what we're hearing from a lot of you is you want to have resources, you want to walk away with some takeaways, and you want to hear what other companies are doing. And I think what Clio's done in partnership with the Mom Project and different companies that are all in part of that Invest initiative is really, really helpful. A lot of the resources Rebecca touched on too, in terms of blog posts, webinars they're doing, things like that has all been really helpful as well. So make sure to go to Clio and you can check out some of those resources. In addition to some of these, I wanted to just, pull back with some of the action items we're seeing. So, the first is integrating an action or integrating action with support. Resources really can't be effective without supportive policies. So while we're seeing a lot of people look into childcare resources, look into, different stipends or things they can give people, if people feel that they can't use that or can't have the balance, it's not going to be as effective. So really, really important that as a leadership team, you're talking about the ways that to sustain this longer term. The second is resource plan effectively. So, flexibility can't solve for this alone. Workload balance and project planning is crucial. We're hearing from a lot of people that, taking care of parents is really important, but now we're kind of hearing the reverse effect of people who aren't parents feeling a little inundated with the work that's being spread to them. So really looking at all resources and planning effectively for that as you're thinking about how do we support parents, but also make sure as a total workforce, we're very inclusive of parents and those who might be taking on some of the burden. And then leverage community. So like I said, consider joining the pledge to commit to and receive helpful resources, support, and data. There will be some awesome continued workshops, resources, and different collateral that you can use. And then I do just want to say that it's not just parents. I think we've been hearing this a lot. So while the topic of this webinar is definitely supporting working parents, we are definitely aware that it's all caregivers. Essentially, there are some people taking care of elder parents. There's some people taking care of sick relatives. There's some people just, cross-sharing across full households right now with siblings and with relatives. So we will talk about this perhaps maybe more in the Q&A, but as Sequoia at least is looking to provide resources for a lot of our clients, we're looking at, what are different childcare resources, remote learning and tutoring resources, and then in addition, just general resources to provide some mental health and break support for those who are just caregivers in general. So definitely important thoughts there. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and switch and just get Crizel's thoughts real quick on this. Crizel, what are you doing over at 23andMe to help support working parents?
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm delighted to be a part of this conversation. So at 23andMe, our parents, they're a pretty large portion of our population. And so this really became a critical issue for us as we headed into shelter in place and the pandemic. In terms of supporting them, there's a couple of things that we have in place that we hope have been helpful to our working parents. First of all, it was really important for us to have executive messaging from the top down. So whether it was Anne, our founder and CEO, or it was Fred, who is the VP of our people team, there was consistent messaging from the top down about that we needed to come together as a company to support our working parents. And the fact that this was conveyed, whether it was an all hands meeting or it was in the emails or the Slack posts that were being posted, it really sent a strong message about the stance that the company was taking in support of working parents. So that was the first thing, one of the first things that we were doing. And then also really giving training and guidance to our managers and our leadership in terms of what are the best ways to be supportive of our working parents. And the guidance that we were giving was we needed to have an increased level of flexibility, meaning for working parents, we knew that their busiest hours are often when the school hours were taking place. And so there were going to be chunks of time during business hours that they may not be available because they're taking care of a child or they're helping their student. And so we gave space for parents to carve out that time as long as they were able to communicate that with their teams and their superiors. Then if we knew what their availability was, then the work and the priorities could be adjusted appropriately, or the work could be shared in a different way in terms of supporting those working parents. So there was a lot of flexibility, a lot of messaging around encouraging that type of flexibility and understanding. And I think also messaging about each parent's experience or each parent's challenges or each parent's victories were going to be different from each other. One family wasn't going to need the exact same solution as another. And so I think the fact that we gave freedom to our managers to be able to support their employees in different ways, whether it was allowing different availability schedules or having those candid conversations with their employees about what their real bandwidth was, I think that sent a really strong message of support as well. We also held events to support families in terms of we hosted family cooking classes, so parents were able to bring their kids on those virtual events. We also had picture challenges in terms of we wanted to see pictures of employees with their children doing something fun. And so the other thing too is we have a very strong parent community that we support. They have a Slack channel. It's pretty much an ERG. And so they're also able to have a space where they can gain support and advice from each other. So that was really important. I think there's, over 100 parents that are active on that channel. And again, it's really just having that top-down support, giving space for the parents to talk to each other and exchange best practices, and then also allowing for that increased level of flexibility. I would have to say those are some of the biggest things that we've been trying to be consistent about over the past few months.
That's great, Crizel. Thank you. A lot of good examples of what you're doing, and I'm excited for your parents at 23andMe. So, Kalina, let's pivot to mental health, a topic that comes up, practically every webinar because we've seen such a big spike in needs and claims around this. I'd like you to invite up Justin and dig in on this.
Yeah, thank you. So, and thanks, Justin, for being here. So I'll kick it off. Again, we touched on this briefly on Tuesday's webinar, but when it comes to supporting workforce mental health, I mean, kind of similar to what we were talking about with parenting, people are just burnt out. The stress of the job, the pandemic, social injustice, parenting, and countless other topics are weighing really heavy on people. And then on top of that, we don't have any outlets. People aren't taking vacations. They're not taking PTO. They're barely stepping away from their computer for more than 10 minutes a day. It's really tough. And so businesses are challenged with, how do we guide our employees? Mental health has been talked about for a while, but it's still a topic that a lot of leaders just don't really feel equipped to discuss or provide support for such a personal topic. And so as Justin goes into some of his findings, really what to consider is just, how do we break the stigma around this topic through awareness and communication? So with that, Justin, I'll let you take it from here and share some of the interesting findings and also tips Ginger has.
Thanks so much. It's really a pleasure to be here today. My name is Justin Hine. I'm the medical director and head of psychiatry at Ginger. And as you all know, we are certainly in unprecedented times right now, and it's really a confluence of a physical health crisis, a mental health crisis, and then an economic crisis, all kind of wound up in one. And we are certainly seeing the downstream effects of these various crises in our numbers at Ginger. We've seen significant upticks, not only in our behavioral health coaching utilization, but also in our clinical services. 125% increase in Ginger members using our coaching, and then a really large bump at 265% increase in the numbers of Ginger therapy and psychiatry sessions. And folks, we're just seeing a large, broad spectrum of issues, and the causes of distress are truly multifactorial in nature. And of course, earlier in the talk, we talked about all of the parenting stressors, of course, that exist right now post-COVID. There is much anxiety about physical health. There's much anxiety about returning to work. There's of course the economic stress mixed in with that as well. And then, I've seen things even in my own clinical work at Ginger that are interesting. I mean, I see a lot of folks in Washington, and so it's kind of these nuanced feelings that, many of the members are, who moved to the Pacific Northwest love the outdoors, and they haven't had the same kind of experiences in the spring and summer in the Pacific Northwest that they normally have. So their life has just changed, and that of course can affect mental health. So about last year, Ginger began tracking U.S. workers' sentiment toward mental health with our annual workforce attitudes toward mental health report. And interestingly, we fielded this survey pre-COVID earlier in the year. Then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and we decided to rerun a series of the original questions in early April 2020, and added a handful of new questions specific to the impacts of the pandemic. And I'm going to quickly kind of go through kind of some 4 radical changes we saw in the results. So first of all, U.S. workers are seeing stress that's truly through the roof. They are actually reporting that this time is even more stressful than the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and then also even more stressful than the 2008 Great Recession. So we are dealing with something of great magnitude here. Second, the COVID-19 related stress is having a dramatic impact on employee productivity. I don't think that's a large surprise to anybody on the line. But what is interesting is we seem to discover in this data, at least, that men appear to be disproportionately impacted. And that has some, important aspects to think about, and that men sometimes are known for not being quite as good about seeking out medical care. So they could let problems kind of fester for a longer period of time and develop a higher level of severity of mental health symptoms. Third, many employees want their companies to have strong emotional and mental health support for their employees. Fourth, employees are very interested in the virtual delivery of mental health care, and I believe we're kind of seeing that in our numbers as well, with a definite spike in both coaching and virtual therapy and psychiatry utilization. So what can HR leaders do to address this mental health epidemic? So first of all, I think one thing that is always prevalent in my clinical work, and as we kind of review coaching transcripts at Ginger as well, is that the uncertainty of the pandemic is truly starting to wear on folks. So the more that employers can create predictable working environment amidst this unpredictable situation. Most people have no idea what's going to happen with their children's school in about 2 weeks, or even currently if they're back to school. So maintaining open communication with their employees, setting clear goals, establishing regular routines, anything that kind of builds that structure is going to have a positive impact on mental health. And also, think about how you can empower your employees and provide them with opportunities for independent decision making, so they can feel like they are more in control at work. At least they can kind of wrap their hands around something at work as the world feels like it's a bit out of control at times. And secondly, we believe HR leaders can promote a healthy work-life balance. And so truly enforcing workforce policies that support clear boundaries, not sending emails late at night. When you have meetings, stick to the time and agenda of the meeting, so the parents can hop off and deal with their other duties in the household and won't have to be delayed. I know my children keep track of my schedule pretty closely. They know when I'm supposed to be done, so that's critical. And then I consider promoting leave and offering mental health days for your employees so they can relax and refresh, especially right now, and that it's really hard to do physical getaways and true vacations. And then also, invest directly in employee mental health too. So support flexible working conditions, as we were talking about earlier, that can help minimize employees' stress levels. The second one is actually a really important one in my eyes. So normalizing grief by, letting your employees know that grief is to be expected during times like these. And when we use the word grief in mental health, we often are not only talking about the loss of a loved one, but really kind of the loss of anything. So the loss of a normal routine, the loss of picking up that Starbucks as you go into work, or as I was saying earlier with the folks in the Pacific Northwest, the loss of hiking every weekend in your local state park. This represents, I think, something that really is beginning to wear on folks at this kind of 4-month mark of the pandemic. So just wanted to emphasize that. And then, of course, you can ponder providing your employees access to virtual behavioral health care as a part of your return to work strategy, so you can take care of any mental health problems that do potentially pop up as this pandemic marches on. And finally, we had a campaign back in May and June at Ginger called Take Time. And I wanted to emphasize the importance of this, regardless of what your, what industry you're in mental health, it really is critical for our coaches, therapists, and psychiatrists to really be highly intentional about being off sometimes. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly what you can do to be off. And because our coaches, for example, are constantly doing text-based chat with our members, and it's hard for them to be away. They don't have the flexibility of a CEO. And so determine what's possible, uncover what truly does nourish you, and then even, consider micro breaks if you do have one of those jobs that is, kind of head down a lot of the day. Just being intentional about every hour taking at least 2 minutes to give your brain a break, and you'll see the positive effects of that. I just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. We have a website that is there to share content, to show support, and reduce stigma around mental health. And you can see here on the screen the various topics that we have addressed: anxiety, parenting, working from home, the ongoing economic stress. But it's at ginger.io/roots. It's really a great resource. If you guys want to tap into that, it's completely free. And in the interest of time, I think we can just run through these final slides really quickly. This is just a representation of the Ginger system. We think about it being 3 layers of care: text-based coaching, along with clinically validated content, as well as evidence-based psychotherapy and psychiatry. It's a complete health system for everybody's challenges that we're dealing with right now. And it's of a high quality and people like it. So we'll move on to the next slide. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Justin. And so I'll just recap. And again, we will be sharing these slides. So great notes, Justin. So I think the big thing, is over-communicate, open communication and transparency around goals and objectives are really going to help build employee confidence right now. Promoting balance, Justin said it great, lead by example, delay late emails to send in the morning and take time off. And lastly, just truly invest in mental health, so provide resources to support employees and create forums for people to discuss those emotions like grief. So couldn't have said it better than Justin did. So love to turn over to Crizel, who can just give a little bit of light to what they're doing at 23andMe.
Sure. So a couple of the things that we've been doing to support mental health at 23andMe, we have offered company-wide mental health days where the entire company, all of those who could, were off of work. We also have what we're calling like early summer Fridays. So every Friday, employees hopefully are not scheduling meetings after 1 o'clock. And so they're able to have, an earlier day and hopefully more time to themselves or additional time with their family and their children. And then some of the other things that I just wanted to share, we have a weekly newsletter, we call it our COVID-19 newsletter, but there's a mental health section in there where we give tips. We pull from resources and give tips about mental health. And then we also have meditation classes that we still continue to offer virtually. We're also open to accommodations. So in terms of employees who are having a really hard time, we encourage conversation with them so we can figure out what we can do to support them. Even small things, we've called on our employees to support each other, to help us support each other, since the people team, we love everyone, but we can't touch every single person. So we ask the employees to check in with each other. There are some employees who are overwhelmed parents, but there are also some employees who are incredibly lonely during this time. And so we've heard stories and seen examples of teams sending a care package to one of their team members that they know is living by themselves and going through the pandemic or quarantine on their own. And then also we have activities where, we focus on gratitude. We encourage employees to post about silver linings, something good that's happening despite all of the uncertainty that we're going through. And then also, really just even at meetings, we've encouraged managers and trained them that they should be doing check-ins even in a meeting style format, and to allow space. It's okay for employees to say that they're not happy today, they're having a hard time, they're overwhelmed. And so really we're just trying to give those tools and encouragement that it's okay to not be okay, and we're going to help each other through it.
Great. Thank you for that. And great content, Justin. Appreciate that. So, Kalina, let's dive right into the culture topic, because it's really, as alluded to, like what happened in the workplace was everyone's reference point for culture. Now we're needing to reshape it. So take it away and invite up, please, Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you on Tuesdays, we kind of talked about this as cultural hide and seek, like where did my culture go? So, the reality is people are missing the office. And I say that, maybe not the commute or the time away from family, but the community and the environment they joined. People signed up for the job, but also for other elements of it. And so businesses are really challenged with, how do we maintain a culture built upon office amenities, live collaboration, community interaction? How do we bring that to the remote workplace so it's not just a job behind a desk, it really brings that to light? And so, what we'll talk through is, what's worth recreating and what's worth changing. So I couldn't think of a better person to talk through some of this than Craig from Culture Amp. So with that, we'll go into the next few slides. This is going to be more of an interactive dialogue. So what I did is took a few really interesting statistics, and I'm going to have Craig weigh in on each of these topics. So the first is a shift in perks. So, as employees and employers transition to this remote work environment, these traditional office perks are proving no longer relevant. And there was a recent study done just a few weeks ago that said, it asked people what they want. And, a lot of people were talking about access to healthcare, relevant healthcare, home office allowance, 38% wanting more personal development, 20% even saying they would stay at their company longer if it remained remote. And so with this, I really wanted to talk, Craig, about kind of what you're all seeing, what people are wanting from their workforce, and a lot of kind of what we touched on too with, you know, the importance of flexibility in this new environment. So I'll let you give some thoughts here.
Awesome. Well, first of all, Kayleena and Sequoia, thank you for inviting me in. Our partnership has always been amazing, and it's great to be here now when we need it most. My name's Craig Foreman. I'm a lead people scientist at Culture Amp, so I do a lot. I've worked a lot with our clients, as well as building community, which we're really proud of, especially in these times, that to bring people together. We don't have the answers. Culture Amp has never claimed to have all the answers, and we think the community and bringing people together in these conversations are so important. You know, this is great, Kayleena, the shift in perks. I wanted to quickly just open. I pulled together a bit of data that I want to talk about that I thought was really interesting in what we've seen, and we can go from there. I do want to share that what I'm pulling this data from is, as soon as this happened, we really moved quickly on tweaking some of our surveys. And by the way, for those that don't know, Culture Amp has, you know, employee listening tools. We do a lot with, you know, one-on-ones performance, but also surveys, engagement, and that sort of thing. And we modified two surveys we created, our COVID, what we call our pandemic survey, which was the first release, which was really kind of a modified engagement survey, particularly around the shift. And we also did a COVID well-being survey, also how people taking care of themselves. Really proud with the amount of data that we had on our pandemic. We had over 750 organizations respond. We had 4.5 million questions to look at. And on the well-being, it was 500 organizations. I want to call out the two highlights that I thought were really relevant, particularly for this group. One is going to see on the surface, we've been talking about it, seems obvious, but that is companies with strong communication practices are much better equipped to adapt. The ability to adapt was the outcome factor we looked at. So we asked lots of questions, but to what effect? What are we driving? And we felt like through all of this, the ability to adapt and change was most important. So I don't think that it's so shocking to know that that when companies had clear communications, that people had more confidence in the ability to adapt. What I thought was interesting was when we looked at those that weren't receiving timely communications, some of these outcomes, 27% were less likely to know where to raise concerns, 37% were less likely to make sufficient adjustments, and 57% were less likely to believe leaders were making effective decisions. So I call that out because I really wanted to call out the impact of the communication and why moving into communication and really revisiting and thinking about it, as obvious as it is, you know, what's the impact? The second one I thought was great. I always love these less than obvious ones. And that was stop talking about work for a moment. There's so much talk about work in all of this. And we found that if managers have regular check-ins with their employees around non-work related activities, employees were 35% more likely to adapt to the situation. And also ensuring employees feel equipped to look after their family and dependents. This is what we're talking about. This is the interesting piece. Without that, or people that felt low on that, only 26% felt they could adapt to change. On the flip side, if they reported that they felt that they were equipped, 82% felt the ability to adapt to change. Dramatic. So I think if we're gonna, I always like to walk away and say there's a couple good takeaways. Revisit communication. As much as it seems like you're probably thinking about it, keep on that. And also work with your managers, particularly, and coach them, engage them, and share the value of talking about things other than work with employees right now. Was really powerful insights. So I wanted to open with that, Kayleena. I think that the shift in perks. What comes up for me when I see this is just this idea of listen. There is no one answer, and this goes back to the tools that we provide others of like, what is your listening strategy? Truly like listening all the way through the process to know where these shifts make sense. Yes, you maybe the bringing the food in and we all ate together was big before. Great, that's not happening now. What are your people wanting? What are they craving? And how are you kind of crafting a solution with them in mind and then looking externally to see what's happening to solve the unique things that our people are wanting?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Craig. And thank you for those statistics too. It's so interesting to see, how different companies have approach this. And I think the concept of, making it not all about work, I've noticed a decrease in Zoom happy hours, and, people are just kind of burnt out with the extracurriculars, but because of that, it's become strictly business. And I think that can be a big challenge. So with that, I want to go ahead and skip ahead. If we can just go one more, actually, to creating an inclusive workforce. So I wanted to touch on something that I saw here on, employees believing, so most employees believe that diversity and equality is important, and remote work offers a significant opportunity for that to change. This is from a survey that talked about how, 65% of people believe that people should be entitled to a great career regardless of where they live, that diversity is essential regardless of, to creativity and innovation. And over half of organizations really believing that working harder to remove those barriers to gender and racial equality will help build trust and confidence. So I thought this was really interesting, just as people are expanding the areas employees can work from, recruiting from different places, there's a positive side to this. And one more thing, and I'll turn over to Craig after this, is I really liked this quote too, that was kind of talking about, if you go to the next, just saying how it's easier to categorize some people's roles and personality types as less interested in engaging, contributing, attending events, or impacted by the workforce. There'll always be employees disinterested in events and quieter about values. It has nothing to do with rank, role, or personality. Culture encompasses everyone, and management should offer a variety of opportunities for staff to engage in and communicate culture. So I want to talk about this, Craig, because you brought up that point about communication, and I'd love to just hear some of your thoughts on how to really include and think about those that are maybe less vocal, especially during this time where you can't run up to them in the hallway or ask them at their desk. So how to be really inclusive.
Yeah, gosh, this is such a rich topic. I would say, a couple of the basics, as always. I'm very extroverted. I love to work. I love to get everybody together on Zoom and brainstorm, and that's not for everybody. So I think the best strategy is being more intentional, thinking about what we spoke about before. What are you going to speak about in meetings? And sending those out beforehand, even if it's a few prompts, to give those that might need a moment to process and have their thoughts together prior. So prepare people, be really intentional about the time. I think that's the big one that I've learned on Zoom or virtually, is it's very powerful if we let go of kind of preconceived notions. I've explored and done a lot with how do we create human connections. It can be done. We have to let go of kind of preconceived notions, using breakouts, coming back together, creating dynamics. But one is preparing people beforehand. The second one is, take a moment, check in the beginning, use smaller exercises to let people kind of get into the room, ground. Something I love to do, and I've done this through our community as I'm coaching others, people in leading these, is when I say check in, it's just simple. It's just to be here. And what we oftentimes do is you can change your name in Zoom by hovering over and rename. And we say, what's one word that summarizes what you're bringing in right now? Seems like a small kind of, probably see that at conferences, but what we've learned is that when you can sit in a meeting and look at a group of people and just see one word, energized, depleted, excited, it really helps what's going on and really understanding. We've given up so much nonverbal communication in this environment, but we can recreate some of this. It's not optimal, but it's usable. So really, like, creative strategies, there's organizations, tips, look for good information. It's available on how to run good virtual meetings. More now than ever, you can't just talk to people. They're going to drop off. So we have to, use a breakout group for 5 or 10 minutes. People do engage in smaller groups. And I will say, I just want to add, we have, aside from cultureamp.com, we have culturefirst.com, which is our place to really, for information for community. A lot of our resources are published there. We have stuff around HR for HR, so support for HR people. But I also want to say there's an insight section. Both of those surveys, we have published our benchmarks around that. So you can go to Insights and you can look at this data and dig into it yourself. We're very big on providing this information. So I just want to make sure, we only had a couple of minutes, that people know they can go and dig in more. We've also released our information on how we're approaching anti-racism in our organization, which it does tie into all of this. How are we feeling and how are we showing up? And we want to not only create it and learn from our partners, but then push it back out to the world, regardless if you're a partner or not.
That's great. Yeah, it's so helpful. And so I wanted to do this last question. We'll kind of use this to segue into the Q&A, which I'd love to hear more from you and that, Craig, but is this concept of remote leadership. I love this quote, you know, when you're in an office, it's like that feeling when a boss walks into the room and it changes the room. Like good leaders have a purposeful way where they guide everyone emotional experience. You know, we need to get more serious. We need to do uplifting. We have something exciting going on. It's much harder to change that through a digital experience. So we've been getting some questions about, you know, what are tips for leaders for uplifting their people virtually? So why don't we go ahead and have you kick that off, Craig, if you can just touch on that, and then anyone else who wants to chime in on, you know, resources and ideas for leaders would be really helpful. So Craig, I'll have you start.
Yeah. Look, again, rich topic. I'd say the first thing that came to mind was we've been a big organization and team of teams, which is Stanley McChrystal. Ironically, this was developed in the military when he was leading the command in Afghanistan, and realized that the troops had to be very adaptable in small groups because what they were dealing with was small pockets that were ever changing. And we've kept up with them. They've been doing some great stuff, but around leadership. And I'd say if there's one tip, and that is you start a meeting with what they call situational awareness. But this goes back to the communication piece, particularly for if it's a large meeting or a group. The leaders come in and may the first 5 minutes, very intentional, just lay out the data. You never know where people are or where they'll be drifting. So in the beginning, make sure the relevant, important data gets out quickly before you move into the kind of the conversation discussion. Lay the field out. The other tip I heard, which I got from oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. She was the Caitlin at Reddit. This is important more now than ever. Yeah, Caitlin Holloway. More now than ever, she really laid this out. Was that and it sounds strange. Have a script. Not that everything has to be scripted, but particularly in these times from your leadership team, make sure your leaders are on the same page, communicating the same way. It goes back to that communication piece we spoke about before. Very quickly, particularly in this medium where we have these few touch points, we don't have those intermediary conversations happening, that your leadership's on the same page, making sure you're not creating confusion accidentally, unintentionally. And I thought that was a great tip, that like get scripted, you know, be intentional about what you want to say, but get scripted for your leadership to make sure that the communication's clear, concise, and not confusing people in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Craig. No, I appreciate it. Really good stuff, rich stuff. Any other points? Because we have a couple questions I want to maybe get to from our chat. So maybe in the spirit of covering a couple more, I'll throw it in there. And thank you, everyone, for your questions in the Q&A. A lot of questions came in around really supporting caregivers. So people who are kind of taking care of elderly parents. We referenced it quickly in our parenting, you know, people taking care of young children. There's a lot of people who have some real serious, I mean, arguably more delicate scenarios with elderly folks. They're in a caregiver role. Interested to hear from our panel today. Is there anything explicit that either your company is doing or that you're you know, consulting on to help support caregivers better in your environment?
Yeah, this is one we talk about a lot because we have traditionally really focused on parents, but we know that many of our members also have responsibilities for elderly relatives and others. I think in the midterm or immediate term, Urban Sitter as a current partner is launching in 2021 elder care. And so adding that to a membership, making sure that's something that's also covered. And then I didn't talk about it, but Clio has, a number of partners in our ecosystem. And so one thing we do is with any employer, we integrate all of their current benefits, and our team really works to help people navigate and know what is available. And so some companies do have elder care subsidies that employees often don't know about. And then we're continuing to build out our ecosystem of partners so that we can support caregivers through that entire journey, including with elder care.
Got it. Thank you. Ms. Casanova, I think you were ready to jump in with some ideas as well. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to share that at 23andMe, we also offer the backup childcare, but the program also extends to elder care. And so employees are able to get a certified caregiver to come into their home or into the home of their elderly parent. So they get 10 utilizations per year. And it's up to a 14-hour day, which either it can give a break to the caregiver or it just allows some support for those families that are particularly stretched thin during this time. So that's one of the things that we're doing to support, in addition to the additional flexibility and compassion.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Craig.
Yeah, I'll be real quick because I know we're moving on. Just one thought that came to mind. Many of you probably have employee resource groups. If you don't already, a great idea is to start an employee resource group for parents and caregivers. Not only is it good as support, but we talked about before communication and listening. It's tricky to listen if you have a lot of employees, but a well-run ERG will help kind of bridge that gap so you can quickly from leadership hear what's going on collectively from a group. So that's something to consider as well, is to help organize those ERGs.
That's a great ad. Thank you. So I'm going to combine two questions. I see a theme here. Maybe we can peck away at it. So questions really about either, I think they're probably coming from startups that maybe don't have maybe the budgets to go after it. And so there's a combo of like, what are some low cost or no cost things that you've seen that really have worked, whether it's on, let's just say to support parents, to engage culture. And there's a connective discussion here about activating the leadership to really take a chance on some of those. And so maybe we can slip that in. We started hitting on that as we entered this discussion. But low cost or no cost effective things in people's control to drive change. Who wants to take a swing at that?
At 23andMe, we really try to involve all different departments in coming up with the messaging and the approach to a lot of how we're supporting employees. And so part of getting the buy-in or the low hanging fruit is also leveraging, for instance, the health plans and the carriers that we already work with. We try to really understand those plans so that we know what's available. For instance, we just hosted this week a webinar through one of our health plans, and there was a really good attendance, and it's something that's we already pay for. So really finding out what is currently part of the benefits you already pay for and maximizing that was one of our approaches in terms of being fiscally responsible.
I did see quickly, one of the questions came up was around setting up ERGs. I would not say I'm the expert on setting up ERGs, but I think we do have some information that I'm happy to pass on to Sequoia that can push out. I want to make sure we give good information on how to properly set up an ARG. I mean, yes, you want an executive sponsor, you want some internal, get your team together, make sure there's a good charter, but the specifics beyond that, I want to make sure I give good information on. So I will pass that on and find that information. I did come with 3 strategies, I think in general, but they do hit to the question. So I just wanted to share those. And I think each of these is there's low cost. So one was something we're seeing new, which is now we're getting 4 or 5 months into this. People are building up time off. They're not wanting to take that time because why take time off? I'm sitting at home. I don't want to use that, yet the burnout's happening. So I've had a few conversations with some HR leaders, and the takeaway that I thought was really great was, and I asked a specific question, how do you encourage people to use it? And what they said was, we've been looking at encouraging people to do projects. So is there a project somebody wants to do that they've been thinking about for a long time? Maybe even chipping in $250 or stipend to support that, and use that as a way to create a channel and share that back out as a way to connect and communicate again. So that was a great idea. The second one was buddy system, particularly for parents and caregivers, buddying them up so they can support one another. So maybe somebody does need to step away, they have time sensitive job, but they have somebody they can lean on, and it's outlined. So creating a buddy system for caregivers internally. And the final one was make distractions human connections. I thought was really great. I think that 2 things, but those moments where the dog hops up or the kid comes in, make that fun, allow that, encourage it. And bring those in, or even bring in, parents into the conversation, or at the end of a meeting, if there's an extra 5 minutes, let people bring their kids on and get to know each other as humans that way. So make those distractions more fun.
That's great. Thank you. We'll take that as the strong close for today's session. Thank you to the panelists. Just wonderful knowledge. If you ever needed more evidence that these conversations, we all get more out of them, they're richer, they're more useful when we come together as a community to discuss. That was reference point A. So thank you to the panelists, you guys. Thank you for our audience. Loved including your questions today, and we'll take those forward into our future ones. Until we meet again, everyone be safe out there, be well, and look forward to talking at a webinar near you soon.